Episode 267, Ireland, Part 2. Hello, welcome. Hope you're doing okay. Still in lockdown, but doing okay here. Hope everybody else is. I know in Ireland we're very close to having no cases of COVID. I don't like mentioning it, but we're very close to having no cases of COVID. I know there are like secondary spikes occurring in Spain, I think Germany as well. I think the UK might be following as well. So there's going to be a lot of restrictions on travel outside of Ireland, for us, which I think is probably a good thing, leaving or arriving, until we get through this. I'm not looking forward to the flu season. I just feel that's a time when everything's going to be and the weather's going to be and it's going to be dark. So anyhow, here we are, Ireland, Part 2. So I spoke a little bit in the last episode about arriving in Ireland, the island of Ireland, for the first time, and I was working in Coleraine and in Monaghan and travelling between the two. Had some very interesting experiences doing that. So that was all good. So I came over, I think it was June 1994, 26 years ago, and a little bit because now July here, but it was an experience. I didn't know what to expect. It was a journey into the unknown. I mean, this predates my trip to China and South Africa and Turkey and all the other countries I visited. This was the first, if you want to call it, a real trip, outside of England. And there's no doubt in my mind that it was, I don't know, it's like going off the edge of a precipice. It's like it takes a lot of effort to do this. To people who've travelled all their lives since they were very young and they've flown around the world and been that privileged to do that, that's brilliant. But when you come from a background, and like a lot of people do, and still do in England, where they don't really travel abroad, other than maybe city flights to Spain, whatever, but it was a big step for me. And a lot of the engineers couldn't do it, didn't do it, and a lot would quit. Not Ireland necessarily, because obviously everybody loves to come to Ireland from England, and they still do, of course. But obviously the other countries were a bridge too far for a lot of engineers. And they're all around my age, sort of, early mid-20s, So I'd come to, I'd sailed to Northern Ireland to learn. Spent some time in Coleraine and Farmfed. Stayed in a few hotels over the years around Coleraine. And I was also in Monaghan as well. I stayed in a couple of hotels in Monaghan. So the job in Coleraine was quite a simple job. It was just one unit and one computer. It was the simplest system that we supplied. And basically it was like a weighing scale with a little bit of a roller conveyor. The box had come down. The box would have like maybe, 6 or 8 chickens in it, and it'd be boxed, and they put it onto the scale, type in a 4-digit product code and press print. A label would come out with a barcode and description and weight, and it'd stick it on, and off it went. And this was connected to one computer in like a control room, and on that computer you could put all your product codes in, all your descriptions and all the rest of it, and the idea was you set them all up in the computer in the control room, and then you'd select them, as the product came down. I still don't know a great deal about chicken, but whatever chicken came down, and then press print, and it would weigh it, and the label would have the weight on. And then you can run reports off on the computer. I mean, maybe nowadays it might sound a little bit simplistic, but it was given a level of insight into the business that the managers didn't normally have. They knew how much raw product was coming in, they knew how many boxes were going out. The records, the weights and the quantities wasn't great. It was a lot of human error. It was all handwritten. It was marker pen on the side of a box with a weight, somebody doing a list on a piece of paper, adding it all up. It was pretty basic, and this system gave them the ability to pretty much automate it, so there was less manual writing things down and all that sort of stuff. And that essentially was the product that had been sold, And as was the case, this was farm-fed chickens in Coleraine, which I do believe are not in existence anymore, but they did actually expand it, and I had another trip a couple of years later, which I'll probably talk about in another episode, where I went from this one scale, one computer to a network of computers, network of scales and one computer server. Monaghan, they got a server. I had a server in the back of the car when I was on the boat, and it was a Hewlett Packard computer. I can't really remember the model number. It's a long time ago, but I remember setting it up, and I remember it was the first Pentium processor ever. It was like, this is the first time I think the processors really became quite powerful at normal room sort of temperatures, whatever. It was the first generation Pentium. And I remember I was in the office and I installed the operating system, which would have been, at this time, it was 1994, it was probably SCO Xenix, SCO Unix, wasn't Windows, for all sorts of reasons, but it was a Unix, a Linux, I think people call it Linux nowadays, but this predates Linux, this predates a lot of that sort of stuff. So, and SCO, Santa Cruz operation, in California. Santa Cruz is in California. I've actually visited there in the last couple of years. It was quite a moment for me. I think people thought to themselves, what's wrong with this guy, you know? They call it old SCO now, because it really is, isn't it? But yeah, it was, there were a few guys, techies in Santa Cruz in California. That's where the business was. And that's where they set up this version of this operating system. So if you're familiar with Microsoft Windows, it's that sort of idea, you know. You could argue it's better, it's not graphical, it's a lot of command line stuff, a lot of commands, a lot of flexibility, and ultra reliable compared to Windows at the time. This, I mean, remember, this predates Windows 95, okay, so yeah, it's was it Windows 3.1? I don't know, don't quote me on that, I'm not a Windows expert. So in Monaghan there was a little bit more work to do. I had to put the server in. It was also connected by a phone line, a modem, so we could talk to it from England if we needed to. You know, that's us talking to it, by the way. Typing on a computer at a remote station back in England through this modem. So that was set up as well. I think the initial installation was quite simple. It was more than one system. I don't know how many it was now, can't remember, maybe 3 or 4. And essentially it was again the scale with this head unit, which was, you know, like an old-fashioned homemade PC type thing with a scale and you know, type the code in. The difference being you had the central server, and they had a little computer room that they had above the offices, and it was there basically. This is where I put it, and the cabling came back to there. It was quite an interesting network. I don't want to get too techie, unless I really have to. I'm not afraid to. I do apologise, I'm still bleeping, everything's muted and I'm still bleep, but anyway I apologise for the little vibrating bleep from the wrist. But basically use what's called an RS485 network, and we're all familiar with Wi-Fi and, you know, a few of us with Ethernet and things like that. Well, this predates Ethernet, that's all it is. It even sort of predates coax. I don't know what the name of it was, but it was like a coax cable with these little BNC connectors and had to be terminated. Nothing like Ethernet and nothing like some of the Wi-Fi speeds we're getting now. Or even Ethernet speeds are very good now. But anyhow, all you really need to know about this network, this RS485 network, was it was a ring. It had to be a complete circuit. So you had the server, a little box of magic tricks, connected by RS-232, which you don't need to worry about either, but it's serial, a very slow form of communication. And then each system was linked by a loop. So it goes to the first system, goes to the next, and so on and so on. And you could have a lot of these, I think for 256 nodes. And then back again to this little box of magic tricks. It sounds, you know what, this is better than sending a cable to each one, just do a huge loop, you know. Well, there's some fundamental problems with this model. One of them being it's a huge loop, and a huge loop is like an antenna, and if you get like lightning or any form of electrical disturbance caused by the weather, it had a habit of breaking every single, you know, device as communications. The other problem was because it was a loop, any break in that loop would just, that was it, your network was gone. So it seemed to have some advantages, but it had a lot of disadvantages. And this little magic box of tricks at the end, in the loop, would have a little LED, and you had to try and work out. It was flashing so many, when it wasn't working, flashing so many times, you had to work out what's the problem. It's like, it was a bit crazy. So, but anyway, that's the type of system that was installed in Monaghan. It was on a server and a few systems, not many. They would go on to expand quite considerably the installation, and involved also like a dispatching module as well, where basically you imagine all the products label, it's got a barcode, it's unique, it's got the weight, that products and everything. Well, they're going to dispatch to a customer. So what they do is they scan all these boxes and then download it to a customer or whatever, and then the dispatch notes will print out automatically. It's quite a nice, neat system. This was an era when computers were sort of involved, but most of it was manual. It was literally relying on people to write things down, or scribble on the side of the box, scribble on a piece of paper, and you'd have loads of paper and loads of people writing weights and counts and stuff. And there was quite a huge margin of error, like there would be when you're talking about hundreds of thousands of chickens every year. I don't know how many, well, there were millions anyway, maybe, but it was definitely an issue. And the company I worked for, they were very forward thinking in that sense, that they'd come up with a product that was really useful to these companies. And it started in the chicken industry. It was used a little bit in other industries, but I think it was the poultry industry was primarily where it was used. So I worked in Monaghan for a while, and I worked with a guy. I'm not going to mention his name. I don't know what age he was. Was he younger than me? I think he could have been a bit old, I'm not sure. But he was from Cavan. He didn't live in Monaghan, he worked in Monaghan. And I thought it interesting, he'd never crossed the border. I think I mentioned before, Monaghan's about, I don't know, it's 12 kilometres to 12 miles, very close to the border. I was crossing the border sometimes 4 or 5 times a day during that period, and he'd never had any inclination, didn't want to, no interest. I found that interesting, he was a nice guy, youngish fella, got on, very clever. He understood the Unix that we was using and stuff, and I just found that quite interesting. That the other thing I noticed as well is at lunchtime he used to go out for quite a big lunch. Was it the Four Seasons just outside Monaghan? I think it was the Four Seasons Hotel. I think it's still there. I was there maybe 5 or 10 years ago. No, I was there fairly recently anyway. That was recent for me. And he would spend £5 a day on his lunch. He'd have a glass of water, and it was a bit like a Carvery affair, But interesting, coming from England and seeing this, I found that quite expensive. I thought, well, you spend that if you don't have any dinner. It was just interesting. But he lived in Cavan. I'm sure he's doing really well now, and I hope everything's going well for him. But it was just interesting that, in Cavan's relatively close to the border as well. It looks, the map's up on the screen here. I can show you there's the border, a very contentious border, and there's Cavan, down here, and there's Monaghan. And I used to go across this. There's Emyvale. Is Emyvale going to appear? There's Emyvale. So there's a duck factory in Emyvale. Never went to it. I think it was, what was it called now? Oh, it's not coming to me, I've lost the name, but there was a duck factory in Emyvale. Used to pass it. Annual engineers who had worked there, I never did though. But this for me was like a very common drive, from Monaghan, Emyvale, across the border, Knocknacloy, Ballygawley, cut across here, Dungannon, Cookstown. I mentioned Cookstown, the last one, and all the way up here now, heading towards Coleraine. I think it's changed a little bit now in the last 26 years, but it's a route I'm sort of very familiar with. I knew it like the back of my hand. I did it day and night, like I said, many times a day, and but to work with someone who never crossed the border, I thought it was interesting. I don't know what much to say about it in a sense. He was a nice guy, and I think he'd worked in the UK as well, and so it wasn't like, I don't know, but it was interesting. I was surprised, just scrolling now across here, and I spoke about a few other places. Still in Coleraine quite a lot. There's a little place called Portrush here. I think there was a bar a multi-level bar, Kelly's I think it was called. Not quite sure if it's still there. But Portrush is like a seaside sort of town on the face of it, you know. Once Coleraine, all the hotels were booked out. I ended up staying in Portrush. And I was there during the daytime. Whatever happened, you know, a lot of times I'd be working at night. So you'd be in the hotel during the day. No heating. It was freezing. It was freezing, you know. I put the light on to try and get some heat, you know. But they didn't have heat during the day because the hotel's normally empty. But it was overlooking the sea, and you could see, I suppose, like the promenade, you know, and all the... I don't know what it looks like now, but I'm still assuming it's a bit of a seaside sort of resort, Portrush. But I remember, I think it was called Kelly's. That seemed to be the hit place to go, you know. I think the couple of very rare occasions when I was working with engineers, they got it a couple of times. And I enjoyed, there was one bar that was really quiet. I like this. I just like to talk, don't I? But there was real noisy type disco bars, and it was there was Leisure Show above it, and there was lots of young people, you know. But I was a young person as well. I've never been to Bushmills where they make the whiskey. I know lots of people that have. So maybe one day I'll go. Never been a huge fan of Irish whiskies. Some of them are quite peaty. I used to go for a Scotch. I don't know at which point I was introduced to Scotch whisky. I remember a late night with a guy I worked with in the 90s, and he said to me, "You know what, Jason, at the end of the evening, we've had a few drinks." In those days I was probably drinking lager. I don't drink lager anymore. At the end of the evening, we had a meal, you know, we're in Scotland. And he says, "You know what, Jason, at the end of the evening, I like to have a rusty nail." I said, "Oh, really?" You know. So we had a rusty nail, and I don't remember what was in it now. There you go. I think it was it Glenmorangie? I think it was Glenmorangie was the Scotch whisky. But whatever about Scotch whisky, it sort of worked for me. I'm not going to turn away an Irish whisky, don't get me wrong. But I'm not a big whisky drinker either, you know. But it was just a thing anyway. So as you can see here, we've also got the Giant's Causeway. I'm sure a lot of people have heard about this if you know about Northern Ireland. It's these amazing, they're a natural structure, but they're actually like hexagonal, these columns of stone. You'd also almost imagine that somebody is, I don't know, you know, they created these. These didn't come naturally, you know. But what I find more fascinating is, so there's the Giant's Causeway. If you hop across to Scotland, I don't know the exact place, so I'm just going to randomly pick a place. But if you go across, this is the real Giant's Causeway. It's the link between Northern Ireland and Scotland. And there are places, I think it's around this part of Scotland here, but I'm sort of guessing now. But there are evidence of the same rock formation, which I just think's brilliant, you know. There's obviously a line here, you know. I'm assuming it's volcanic in nature, because it reminds me of crystals, which I consider the natural substances, like. And it's been created by that. And I think that's fascinating. So I always said to myself, one, I've been to Giant's Causeway a few times, very recently as well. There's now a massive commercial enterprise there. It's like a visitor centre and all the rest of it, you know. When I first went there, it was like you just walk down a path and there you go. Now you can get a bus tour and all sorts of stuff, you know, which is I'm not saying that's bad, it's just a bit commercialised, you know, like the Cliffs of Moher, but we won't talk about the Cliffs of Moher. But anyhow, I always said to myself, I want to go to this part of Scotland. And the only thing that put me off is exactly where it is, which is there. So yeah, it's a bit hard to get to. Like I said, I sailed from Stranraer. I was going to say Stranraer. I've sailed from Stranraer, and I've also sailed from Carnarvon. And that's hard to get to, and that's got some pretty good roads. God only knows what it's like to get to this, but anyway, this part of Scotland, you know. But if a helicopter was available, you know, that might be the best option. So anyway, so yes, that's that part of Scotland, that part of Northern Ireland. So when I was over the first time, I was working between Coleraine and Monaghan for about 5 weeks in total. I think that's about 3 weekends, is it? 3 or 4 weekends. The first weekend, I think I was in Monaghan mucking around. It was a new installation. The engineers used to do some of the work, but I ended up doing quite a bit of the work, you know. That was quite common. I always worked on my own. Very rarely had anybody with me, you know, unless there was some sort of expert. And there was very few of those. But I think the first weekend I was in Monaghan. The second weekend I was actually in Lurgan. I'm going to try and find it now without making a fool of myself. There's Lurgan. And there was a company called Farm Crest Chickens. So they were like I don't know what you call it, sister factory to farm fed. They seem to specialise in frozen chicken, if memory serves me well. And the equipment I worked on there was nothing to do with Unix servers or anything like that. It was a different part of the business. And they had basically, I'm trying to remember the other production line where the chickens come along in what's called a shackle. At this stage, they look like you get them in the supermarket, so there's nothing ultra gory really, but they're coming around on these shackles. They'd be weighed, and then a little ram would push them into a bin depending on the weight, normally the weight, you know. So I don't know what, I think we were expanding the number of drops, a drop being where the chicken would be knocked off the line into the bin, you know, and the bin at the bottom of the bin would usually be, dare I say, a woman. It was normally a woman, and she would take these chickens, truss them with a bit of elastic, and put them into the boxes. And the boxes went off, and normally the boxes would end up being weighed by some other equipment that we used to produce. It was primarily women that did this, and I think that's just because women are better than men. Let's leave it there. But so I think the production line was being extended, and I was doing some work with a long-time engineer. He came over. I'd already been there for a few weeks. He came over separately. We met up. And we did this job. It was a weekend job, you know, and they're not all great. This particularly was bad because of July. And you're going to say to stuff, why is July bad? You know, and I know you might be thinking about the glorious 12th. I'm not thinking about that, actually. It was really warm. And because we were working on the line, they didn't clean it down. They didn't hose it down. So it was really smelly. I mean, yeah. These are things you remember, you know, the smells of these places. So it was pretty smelly. Now, they hosed it down once we left, once we'd finished. But we was there for a couple of days. I was trying to work out what hotel we were staying in. I had a quick look. I couldn't find it. Maybe it didn't look hard enough for me and this other guy, but it wasn't too far away. And I keep thinking Silver Springs, but I don't think it's Silver Springs. I think they had an artificial a ski course. It was quite strange, but if this ends up on YouTube, then if you know what I'm talking about, put it in the comments, and if you don't, that's fine as well, you know. I did look at the Hastings group because I'd stayed in a few of their hotels. Well, I don't think it was one of those anyway. It was fairly near Lurgan anyway. I know that. It wasn't in the centre of town, but we were working there, you know. So that was one of the weekends. So there was 2 weekends gone there. And the third weekend, there was the manager just said, listen, Jason, it's up to you what you want to do. You know, you can stay in a hotel and do your own thing for the weekend in Monaghan. That's what they had me, because it was cheaper than staying in Coleraine at the time for all sorts of reasons. I mentioned it in the other podcast. But we'll fly you home. We can fly you home Friday evening, fly you back Monday morning. You know what? It's going to cost the same to us. 2 flights or a weekend in a hotel getting drunk. What do you want to do? And it was quite fortuitous, this, because ironically, before I'd gone to Ireland, I'd ordered my first PC, my first computer. So I'd never had a home computer. I know when I started with this company, they'd lent me one of the servers to have a look at, and I didn't know what I was doing. But I had to get I knew I wanted a PC, you know. This would be 1994. I don't know, I suppose if you're in the UK or Ireland, you've heard something called the catalogue, which is like, you know, it's a big book, and you can get stuff and pay over a period of time, you know. And I picked a computer. The computers were rubbish, and I knew at the time they were rubbish. But a rubbish computer is better than no computer. So I ordered a Packard Bell. I mean, Packard Bell, nothing to do with Hewlett Packard. And I'm going, yeah. So I ordered this computer, and I'd ordered it a long time before I went away to Ireland. I assumed I would have it before I went, and I was all excited, you know, the typical geek techie that I was. Maybe still am, but it didn't arrive, did it? It didn't arrive, and I'm like, oh, you know. And I'm over there, and I think the second weekend, because at that time I was living with my dad and brother. My dad, I was talking on the phone. It's arrived. It's good. You know, it's gone. Yeah. And I'm stuck here doing this. You know. So the opportunity was: are you going to stay in a hotel and get drunk, or are you going to fly home for the weekend and see your computer? So you can imagine the option that I took. I wanted to see my computer, didn't I? So I did. Now, I'm trying to put on the screen here. This is probably the best I can do, and it's not very good. I did a quick search on, I don't know if it's going to come up very large, the fate of my first ever PC. Someone's wrote an article about this, it wasn't me. But This is all rubbish. Sorry, I do apologise. This is nothing to do with me. There it is. I don't know if I can enlarge it a little bit. Didn't enlarge it very much. That's my first PC. Now, whatever model they're talking about on this article as their first PC, I know mine was rubbish. It had hardly any memory, the graphics were rubbish. It had a massive screen. I don't remember speakers, it could have had speakers. You know what? By any standard, any measure standard, it was shit. But for me, it was the most amazing thing I'd ever had, you know. I'd had a Commodore 16 and a Commodore 64 and an Amiga when I was a lot younger. But this was a real PC. I mean, to put in perspective, I was installing around this time, in the next couple of years, I was installing PCs into these factories. And they weren't very high end, they were maybe mid-range. And they were between £5,000 and £7,000, right? Which, I mean, in today's money would be maybe £10,000 sterling, whatever that is, $15,000, 13,000 euro. You know, computers were dear. I think this one set me back about £1,500, but I paid it over, I don't know, a year or 2 years or something. So, and I got it, you know, and it looks like this. You know, I can't see it being exactly the same one. But it was pretty much, this was it. It was a CRT, of course. There was no LED screens, LCD screens. And it was a bit clunky. But you know what? It was a PC. It was my PC, you know. And I pretty much spent the whole weekend messing with it. There was no internet. Now, it might be hard for some people to understand there was no internet. And even hard for me now, to be honest. Like, there was no cell phones, you know, no mobile phones. Not to speak of, anyway. But I did find a way, you know. I'm trying to remember what it's called now. The name's gone for me now. CompuServe. It hasn't gone for me after all. CompuServe. So there was a way, if you had a modem, you could log into CompuServe, which is essentially a text-based thing. It's the best way to describe it, you know. And I acquired a modem, and even by 1994 standards, this modem was rubbish. If you're a techie at all, it was 300 baud. 300 baud, just put that in perspective. But you know what? It was going to go in the bin. I got it, hooked up to my computer, and you know, I signed up to CompuServe, and I'm like, this is, you know, it's per minute. CompuServe used to charge by the minute, and you was charged when you connected to the access point phone number per minute as well. So I'd literally connect, and I could be a clock counting. I'm going, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? You know, and get it over with. But that was my first experience of anything like remotely like the internet and computing, and it was a good experience. I mean, as the years went by, I realised it was woefully underpowered. The hard disk, I think, was about 128 megabytes. The memory was like really, really bad. I think it was 4 mega memory. I'm not quite sure. It was pretty pathetic, but it was PC. It was my PC. And the way I travelled, so this is interesting. So I'd never flown before. This is predates any flying I'd done. So I'd been in Ireland for a couple of weeks, another 3 weeks to go, say. Given the option of coming home, God, yeah, I want this PC. But then, well, we'll fly you home. And there was this, it was almost like a battle between being the super intelligent, clever person I am. There was a fear of flying, you know, just inherent. Why wouldn't there be? I mean, what's natural about getting a metal tube and going up in the air? I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it? But the PC was there, and I could be there. I could got 45 minutes flight from Belfast Aldergrove to Manchester Airport. Then it's a 40-minute train journey to Huddersfield. Boom, and then I'm there. My PC, I can it's still in a box. I can open a box, and you know. And there was that fear. There was that moment, and I've had it a few times in my life where you're gonna have to push yourself here, Jason. You're gonna have to go, listen. Do you want to have a go on that PC? Or do you want to wait another 3 weeks? But knowing that my role with the company was going to involve way more flying than that, I mean, that's nothing. It's not even like in a bus, not even like in a taxi. That's nothing of a flight, you know. So that was one of the catalysts with flying for the first time. And I remember the Friday afternoon, I was actually in Monaghan, you know, because I've been staying in Monaghan. So I checked out a hotel and drove up to Belfast Aldergrove Airport. There's two main airports in Northern Ireland. There's Aldergrove, which is called the International Airport. And then there's it used to be called Harbour, then it's called City, now it's City Stroke George Best Airport. But basically, if you're going, long journeys, you would normally go out of Aldergrove. But at this time, I was flying to Manchester, and the flight went from Aldergrove. So I remember parking up in the car park and looking up. There were some flags at the time, and they were flapping in the wind, And there was apprehension there, I mean, it's easy to be fearful of something when you don't know what it's going to be like. And then there's also that fear of, this is a really strange thing. You're going to strap yourself in this thing. I don't know what age I was. I was 23. I'm guessing I'm 23. I was 23. Never flown before, Bear in mind, I'd never been abroad, really. This is abroad, not on the island, island abroad, wow. And now I've got to get a flight. And I remember going into the airport, and I didn't even know, you don't know what to do, you need to be, and in those days in Aldergrove, because I'm not saying that the troubles were not at their height, I don't believe, in the 90s, but they were still ongoing. So it was quite unique as an airport, because when you used to come into the airport, even before getting anywhere near any gates, they would, frisk you, scan you, x-ray, whatever, And then you go in, there's along like a slope you go up, and then you're in the airport, And I remember sitting there, it was very early for the flight, and watching planes coming and going, And every time one took off, I'd see it going along the runway and shooting up in the air, and going, I know I'm an intelligent person. I think I am. I know how the plane works, I know there's always talk about, the Bernoulli principle and everything else, but I know how it all works, I know how reliable they are, I know how they're built. I know pretty much the nth degree, But sitting there watching these flights taking off, just going up in the air really high, I'd never been that high in my life. I've been at the school I went to, I think I don't know, 4 floors or something. That was high, And then to see something going up thousands of feet, and not knowing what the sensation would be like, Do you feel you're stuck to your seat? Do you feel seasick? I've been on a ferry, feeling quite queasy, and it was quite a calm ferry. What's going to happen, And I got on the plane, and it was this plane. I should use my screen more. It was a British Aerospace ATP. It shows that there's a few on here. These go back in time. That was the Havilland Comet. I don't know. It doesn't go back to the comet, but there's a history. I think Hawker Siddeley. It's a connection with Hawker Siddeley. And maybe if you look at this picture now, this plane, you're going to say to yourself, "It's got propellers. It's rubbish." But it's not rubbish. That's the whole point. These engines are turboprops. So essentially what that means is it's a jet engine. Below, you can't see me pointing now. Below there's actually a jet engine here, and that's what's causing the propeller to spin. They're incredibly efficient anyway. And that essentially is the type of plane I flew on for the first ever time. And it was July, the weather was brilliant. I don't think you go more than about 13,000 to 14,000 feet, I'm not sure, it wasn't very high. You go across over the Isle of Man. I remember the pilots often used, we're now crossing over the Isle of Man. And lots used to say that. And then you come into Manchester. And sometimes you have to circle Manchester. I know it's not as busy as Heathrow, but yeah. And you'd land. So I landed, boom. Not boom, no, I landed in softly, it was perfect actually. And I remember thinking, wow, this is amazing. And having driven, to Northern Ireland with the ferry and how long it took, to do it in like 45 minutes was just like unbelievable, And then I'm at the airport, and there's a train station, get on the train, way to Huddersfield. Got home, unpacked the computer, magical. I don't remember anything about the weekend, but I know it was quite enjoyable, And then on the Monday morning, I had to get back to Manchester. I remember getting the train from Huddersfield, my dad waving me off, I remember getting the train and arriving in the airport. I don't really remember very well. I remember getting on the plane, and there was a guy next to me, and he was a bit nervous, whatever. We got chatting, and it was good, and the flight was fine. Landed in Aldergrove, my car was still there. Really, it was a Vauxhall Astra Estate, I think the car at the time. It was a red one. Anyhow, there's a whole other story around that. But that was my first ever flying experience, and it was born out of necessity, my fantastic computer, the geek in me, and also, staying in a hotel on your own over a weekend drinking, I don't think there's much fun in that, when you work a lot, and I was working quite a lot. I enjoy getting away. I enjoy getting away from my dad and brother. It was fantastic. I recommend it to anybody. Whoever you're living with, it's great to get away. But it was also nice to come back and play on my computer. So yeah, that's that's part two. More to follow anyway. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that.